The air inside the small funeral hall felt heavy and still, as if even the wind outside didn't want to disturb the silence. Soft piano music played in the background and people spoke in whispers. Everyone was dressed in dark colors, their eyes red from crying. But among all those faces, one stood out. A young girl sitting quietly on the front bench, her hands trembling in her lap. Her name was Lena, and she was trying to hold herself together. She had been told again and again to stay strong, to accept what had happened. But how could she? How could she say goodbye to the one person who had always been her world? Her eyes drifted toward the open coffin at the front of the room. Inside it lay her father, the man who had taught her everything she knew about kindness, patience, and courage. He looked peaceful now, his hands folded gently over his chest. But that peace broke Lena's heart even more because it reminded her that he would never wake up again. She stared at him for a long moment, her eyes filling with tears she tried not to let fall. She remembered the last conversation they had, only a few days before everything changed. He had told her to take care of herself, to keep studying hard, and to never forget to smile. He had laughed that warm, familiar laugh, the one that always made her feel safe. She never imagined it would be the last time she'd hear it. The priest's voice echoed softly, saying comforting words about love and eternal rest, but Lena barely heard any of it. Her mind was somewhere else, back in those memories that refused to fade. She saw her father's face on a bright summer morning years ago, when he taught her how to ride a bike in the park. She remembered how she fell several times, scraping her knees, but he never scolded her. Instead, he laughed, helped her back up, and said, "Falling just means you're learning." She had believed him then, and she still believed him now. Only this time she felt like she had fallen too hard to get up again. Someone gently placed a hand on her shoulder, her aunt, whispering that it was time for family members to say their final goodbyes. Lena nodded slowly. Her legs felt weak as she stood up. The sound of her footsteps echoed in the quiet room as she made her way to the front. When she reached the coffin, she froze. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. The man who had always been full of life and who could fix anything, who could make anyone laugh, was lying there so still, so cold. She didn't want to believe it. Her heart refused to accept what her eyes were seeing. People behind her were quietly crying. Her aunt sniffled into a handkerchief, and her uncle patted her shoulder. But Lena's focus stayed on her father's face. She wanted to remember every detail. The lines around his eyes from years of smiling, the faint scar on his chin from when he once fell off a ladder fixing the roof, and that small curl of hair that never stayed in place no matter how much he tried to brush it down. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered softly, "I'm here, Dad." Her voice shook, but she kept talking, as if afraid that silence would take him away even more. "I know you'd tell me not to cry. You always said strong people smile through pain, but it's really hard this time." She wiped her face and took a deep breath. "You always told me life is full of surprises, but I never wanted this kind of surprise." Someone behind her whispered that she could take her time. Lena nodded again, her hands gripping the edge of the coffin. She hesitated for a second, then leaned forward. Slowly, she placed her hands on his. They felt cool and firm, not like the warm, calloused hands that used to hold hers on walks to school. That coldness made her shiver. Her heart squeezed painfully in her chest. She bit her lip, trying not to break down completely, but her tears came anyway. Without thinking, she leaned closer and wrapped her arms around him, pressing her face against his chest. Gasps came from some of the mourners. Her aunt tried to reach out to stop her, but then she saw the look on Lena's face. Pure heartbreak, but also love. And she let her be. Lena hugged her father's still body tightly. She whispered, "I love you, Dad. I love you so much. I don't know how to live without you." The room was silent except for her quiet sobs. It was the kind of silence that seemed to stretch on forever. She stayed like that, holding him, her tears soaking into the dark fabric of his suit. She didn't care what anyone thought. She just wanted one more minute, one more hug. As she held him, she closed her eyes and remembered the night he tucked her into bed when she was little. He had told her stories, some real, some made up, about how the stars were actually people watching over their loved ones from the sky. He told her, "Whenever you miss me, just look up. I'll be there." That memory hit her like a wave, and she whispered, "If you're really watching, please give me a sign." A faint sound echoed. Maybe it was the wind outside, or maybe the wood of the coffin creaking slightly, but it made Lena lift her head. For a moment she thought she had imagined it. Then she felt something, a faint warmth almost like a soft pulse under her fingertips. Her breath caught. She blinked and touched his hand again. It was probably nothing, she thought. Maybe her hands were just warm from crying. But still, that moment made her heart skip. She looked around. No one else seemed to notice. Everyone was watching her silently, unsure whether to comfort her or give her space. She lowered her head again, whispering through tears, "I wish you could just tell me you're okay." She stayed there, her arms around him, her face pressed to his chest. And then, for just a split second, she thought she heard something, a faint whisper, almost like someone saying her name. It was so soft that she couldn't tell if it came from outside or from deep within her own heart. But it made her shiver. She whispered again, "Dad?" No answer came, only the quiet hum of the funeral hall. Still, something about the air felt different, lighter, calmer. Her heart, which had been aching moments ago, suddenly felt warmer, as if she was being comforted by an invisible presence. Her aunt came forward and gently touched her shoulder. "Sweetheart, it's time," she said softly. "We have to let him rest now." Lena nodded weakly but didn't move right away. She looked one more time at her father's face. He looked peaceful, almost like he was just asleep. "I'll make you proud," she whispered. "I promise." Finally, she stood up, her knees shaking slightly. She reached out and brushed her fingers over his hand one last time, then stepped back. As she walked away from the coffin, she felt something deep inside, not just sadness, but a strange, quiet strength. It was as if her father had passed some of his courage to her in that final moment. When she returned to her seat, she noticed something strange. The photo of her father placed near the coffin, the one from his birthday last year, seemed to catch a ray of light from the nearby window. The sunlight hit the glass perfectly, making the picture glow softly. It felt almost magical. For a moment, it looked like he was smiling brighter than before. Lena stared at it, her eyes wide, her tears momentarily forgotten. Maybe it was just the way the light fell, or maybe it was her father's way of answering her wish. Her aunt squeezed her hand gently, thinking she was still crying. But Lena wasn't crying anymore. She just kept staring at that glowing photo, her heart beating fast. Deep inside, she felt something shift, a small spark of hope among the sorrow. When the service ended and people started to leave, Lena stayed behind for a while. The hall was nearly empty now, and the candles flickered quietly. She walked back to the coffin once more, just to whisper a final goodbye. "I don't know if you can hear me," she said softly, "but thank you for everything. For being my best friend. For teaching me how to be brave. I'm scared right now, but I'll keep going. I'll try to live the way you wanted me to." She smiled faintly, even through the tears. Then she turned and walked out of the hall, the faint warmth she'd felt earlier still lingering on her hands. Outside, the sky was cloudy, but one small patch of sunlight broke through, falling directly on her face. She closed her eyes and let it warm her skin, and for the first time that day, she didn't feel alone. The next morning was quiet, almost too quiet. Lena sat by the window in her small room, staring at the gray sky outside. The funeral was over, but the heaviness inside her chest hadn't lifted. Everything around her still felt hollow, as if the world had lost its color. The chair her father used to sit in was empty. His favorite coffee mug still sat on the table. It was strange how a person could be gone, yet their presence lingered in every corner of the house. She hadn't slept much that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the image of her father lying peacefully in the coffin. But there was something else too, something she couldn't stop thinking about. That faint warmth she felt when she touched his hand. It had been so real, like a heartbeat, a soft pulse beneath her fingertips. She had told herself it must have been her imagination, a trick of the mind caused by grief. But a small part of her wasn't so sure. She reached out to the table beside her bed and picked up a small silver locket. It was a gift from her father on her 10th birthday. Inside was a tiny photo of the two of them, smiling under the sun at the park. She held it tightly, whispering, "I miss you so much." Her aunt called her from the kitchen, saying breakfast was ready. Lena didn't feel hungry, but she went anyway. The smell of tea filled the air. Her aunt tried to smile, though her eyes were tired too. They sat together in silence for a while, the only sound being the soft clink of spoons against cups. Her aunt finally spoke. "Your father would want you to eat, dear." You have to stay strong, Lena nodded quietly. I know. But strength didn't feel like something she had anymore. She stirred her tea slowly, watching the ripples move across the surface. After a long pause, she asked, "Do you believe in signs?" Her aunt looked up. Signs? What kind of signs? Like when someone passes away, but they still try to reach us somehow. Her aunt gave a gentle smile. When your heart loves someone that deeply, it's natural to feel their presence. Maybe it's not them reaching out. It's your love that refuses to fade. Lena nodded again, though she wasn't completely convinced. She didn't want to sound foolish, but deep inside, she was sure she had felt something at the funeral. Something real. Later that afternoon, she decided to visit the cemetery again. The air outside was cool and the wind carried the faint smell of rain. She held a small bouquet of white flowers as she walked down the quiet path. The world seemed slower here, peaceful but sad. Birds perched on the branches above, their chirping soft and distant. When she reached her father's grave, she knelt down and placed the flowers beside the fresh mound of soil. The gravestone was simple, with his name carved neatly into the stone. She traced the letters gently with her fingers and whispered, "Hi, Dad." Her voice broke a little. She took a deep breath and continued, "I don't know how to do this. I keep expecting you to walk in through the door or call my name. Everything feels empty without you." She sat there quietly for a long time, talking to him like she used to when he was alive. It felt strange at first, but then it began to feel comforting, like he was actually listening. Then something happened. A small gust of wind blew across the graveyard, rustling the leaves. The flowers she had placed began to sway. She looked up, expecting clouds, but a single ray of sunlight broke through, falling directly on the gravestone. The light was warm, soft, almost golden. Lena blinked in surprise. She reached out her hand toward it, and the sunlight warmed her palm. A small smile tugged at her lips. It was probably just the weather, she thought. But her heart whispered something else. Maybe it was him, letting her know he was near. She stayed there for a while longer, just sitting in silence. The wind brushed gently against her hair, and the sunlight kept shining even though the rest of the sky was cloudy. For the first time since the funeral, she felt calm. When she returned home, the house didn't feel quite as cold. She went to her father's study, a small room filled with books and old photographs. The faint smell of his cologne still lingered in the air. She ran her fingers along the desk, remembering how he used to sit there, reading late into the night. Papers were neatly stacked, and his favorite pen still rested by the lamp. She sat down on his chair, spinning it slightly the way he used to when he was thinking. She closed her eyes and whispered, "If you really can hear me, please give me a sign, anything." For a few seconds there was nothing but silence. Then, as if in answer, a faint creaking sound came from the bookshelf behind her. She turned quickly. One of the books had slipped out slightly, just enough to catch her attention. Her heart raced. She stood up, walked over, and pulled it out. It was an old brown diary. She had never seen it before. The pages were slightly worn, the handwriting familiar, her father's. She opened it carefully. On the first page he had written, "For my daughter, if she ever needs to find me when I'm gone." Her breath caught. She turned the pages slowly. Each one was filled with little notes, memories, advice, and words of encouragement. He had written about the day she was born, how he felt holding her for the first time, how proud he was of the person she was becoming. Tears filled her eyes as she read on. One line stood out to her. "Even when you can't see me, remember that love doesn't end. It changes form, but it never disappears." Lena pressed the book to her chest, tears streaming down her face. It felt as though he had known exactly what she would need one day. That diary wasn't just words, it was his voice, guiding her through the silence that night. She couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. The warmth at the funeral, the sunlight at the cemetery, the book that had fallen just when she asked for a sign. Maybe these weren't coincidences. Maybe her father really was trying to reach her, to let her know that he was okay. She fell asleep with the diary beside her, her hand resting on it as though she were holding his hand again. For the first time in days, her sleep was deep and peaceful. And then, in her dream, she saw him. He was standing in their old garden wearing the same light blue shirt he always wore on Sundays. He looked healthy, smiling gently, his eyes full of warmth. "You're doing good, kid," he said softly. "I told you I'd never leave you." Lena ran to him, tears streaming down her dream self's face. She hugged him tightly. He felt solid, real. "I miss you so much," she whispered. "I know," he said, resting his hand on her head the way he always did. "But you have to keep going. I'm proud of you." The next morning she woke up with tears on her cheeks but a calm heart. The room was filled with soft morning light, and for a moment, she could still feel his hand on her shoulder. It faded slowly, but the feeling stayed. She sat up and opened the diary again. On one of the last pages there was something new, something she hadn't noticed before. A small envelope was taped there with her name written on it in her father's handwriting. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside was a small piece of paper that said, "Follow your heart. It will always lead you back to me." There was also a tiny key. She had no idea what it was for, but she felt it had meaning. She looked around the study again, her eyes scanning the shelves and drawers. Then she noticed a small wooden box tucked under the desk. It had a keyhole. Her hands shook as she placed the key in and turned it slowly. The lock clicked open. Inside the box was a collection of things, old family photos, a letter, and a small pendant shaped like a heart. The letter read, "For when you're ready to let go of the pain, but not of the love." Lena held the pendant close, her tears falling freely now. Somehow it felt warm in her hand, just like her father's hand had felt that day at the funeral. She didn't understand how, but she knew it was a sign, a real one. That night she went outside and looked up at the sky. The clouds had cleared and stars sparkled above her. She remembered what her father once told her, that the stars were people watching over the ones they loved. She smiled softly and whispered, "I saw your signs, Dad, thank you." The wind brushed past her cheek gently like a hand wiping away her tears, and though the night was silent, she could almost hear his voice. Not loud, not clear, but enough to fill her heart. He was gone, yes. But he wasn't truly gone. Something amazing had begun, something that told her love could never die. Days passed and life slowly began to settle into a strange rhythm for Lena. The pain was still there, but it was no longer unbearable. Something about finding her father's diary had changed her. Every night she would read a few pages before going to sleep, and every word felt like he was right beside her, guiding her gently through the darkness. One evening, as she sat by the window reading, she noticed something unusual. The pages she had read before seemed to have faint pencil marks she hadn't noticed earlier, small arrows and circles around certain words. At first she thought it was just random doodling, but when she looked closer she realized it was almost like a hidden message. The circled words read, "Listen when it's quiet." She frowned, puzzled. What did that mean? Was it a metaphor? Or was her father trying to tell her something more? She closed the book and turned off the lamp. The room grew quiet. Outside, the wind was still, and even the crickets had stopped singing. She sat there listening. For a while there was nothing, only the faint sound of her own heartbeat. Then, out of nowhere, she heard a soft whisper. It wasn't loud, more like a thought passing through her mind, gentle but clear. It said, "I'm proud of you." Lena froze. Her eyes widened and her breath caught. It sounded just like him. The same tone, the same warmth in his voice. She looked around, her heart racing. "Dad?" she whispered. "Is that you?" There was no answer, only silence. She pressed her hand to her chest, trying to calm herself. Maybe it was her imagination, she thought. Maybe she missed him so much that her mind was playing tricks. But deep down, something told her it wasn't. The next day, she couldn't stop thinking about it. She told no one, not even her aunt. People would think she was imagining things. But that whisper felt too real to ignore. She decided to test it. That night before bed, she sat quietly again with the diary in her lap. "If that was you," she said softly, "can you please give me another sign?" The clock ticked quietly on the wall. Minutes passed. Then suddenly the light in her room flickered. Once, then twice, before returning to normal. Her heart skipped. There was no wind, no power issue. It was just a flicker, timed perfectly after her words. She smiled faintly, tears filling her eyes. "You really are here, aren't you?" After that, things started happening in small, gentle ways. Whenever she felt lost or sad, something would remind her of him. A song on the radio they used to sing together would start playing out of nowhere, or she'd smell his favorite aftershave for just a second in an empty room. It wasn't scary. It was comforting. like he was keeping his promise to never leave her. One day, while cleaning his study, Lena found an envelope she hadn't noticed before taped beneath the desk drawer. Inside was a folded letter. Her heart pounded as she unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was unmistakably his. It said, "If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to say the things I should have. I've watched you grow into someone strong, kind, and brave. Don't let sadness hold you back. There's so much in life waiting for you, and whenever you need me, just listen. I'll always find a way to reach you." Lena pressed the letter to her chest, tears flowing freely. It was as if he knew exactly what she needed to hear, even after he was gone. She whispered softly, "I hear you, Dad, I really do." That night she dreamt again. In her dream, she was standing in a field full of tall grass and sunlight. The air was warm and everything felt calm. Then she saw him, standing a few steps away, smiling just like before. He looked younger, full of life. "You found the letter," he said with a grin. She nodded, tears in her dream eyes. "I did. It felt like you were talking to me." "I was," he said simply. "You've always been good at listening." "I don't know how to live without you," she said. He stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to live without me. You just have to live for me. Every time you smile, every time you help someone, I'll be there." The dream felt so real that when she woke up, she could still feel the warmth of his touch. She sat up slowly, her heart full of both sadness and peace. It wasn't the kind of dream one forgets. It was a message, one she could feel deep inside. From that day, Lena began to change in small ways. She started painting again, something she used to love before her father got sick. Her first painting was of the field from her dream. Golden grass, blue skies, and a figure in the distance smiling at her. Every time she painted, she felt a strange calmness, as if her father was watching her work, quietly proud. And sometimes when she finished a piece, the same soft whisper would pass through her mind again. "Beautiful." Her aunt noticed the change too. "You seem lighter these days," she said one evening as they ate dinner together. Lena smiled softly. "I think I'm learning to listen better." Her aunt gave her a puzzled look but didn't ask further. Some things didn't need explanation. Weeks passed. One evening, Lena got a call from her college. Before her father passed, he had helped her apply for an art scholarship, though she had almost given up on it after losing him. Now the call was to inform her that she had been selected. Her hands trembled as she held the phone. The letter from the committee said they were impressed by her work and the emotion it carried. She couldn't help but smile through her tears. It felt like her father's voice echoed in her heart, saying, "See? I told you not to give up." She walked outside that night and looked up at the stars. "Thank you," she whispered. "I couldn't have done it without you." The wind brushed against her cheek softly as if answering her. The world around her felt alive again. Every sound, every breeze, every glimmer of light seemed connected to something greater. A few days later, as she was packing for her move to the art school, she placed the diary, the letter, and the small heart pendant into her bag. They were her treasures, reminders that love didn't end with death. Before leaving the house, she walked into her father's study one last time. The late afternoon sun filled the room with golden light. She stood there quietly, taking it all in. "I'm leaving for the new city tomorrow," she said softly. "I'll do my best. I'll make you proud." The room stayed still, but then faintly the pendant around her neck warmed against her skin. It wasn't hot, just a gentle, familiar warmth. She smiled through her tears. "I'll take that as a yes." When she reached the door, she hesitated for a moment, then turned around. "Goodbye for now," she whispered. Outside, the sky was painted with orange and pink as the sun set. She felt the wind behind her, strong but comforting, as if it was pushing her gently forward. For the first time since losing him, she wasn't afraid of what came next. That night, she wrote in her own journal, something she hadn't done in years. Her first line was simple. "Love doesn't disappear. It just changes how it speaks to us." She looked at the page for a long time, then smiled. She knew her father's whispers would follow her wherever she went, in her dreams, in her art, in her heart. As she lay down to sleep, the diary still by her bedside, she whispered one last time, "Good night, Dad." And though no one else could hear it, a faint voice answered back, warm, loving, and familiar. "Good night, my little girl." The room grew quiet again, but the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with something unseen, something eternal, the kind of love that even death couldn't break. The morning of her move came sooner than Lena expected. The boxes were packed, the small car was waiting in the driveway, and her aunt stood by the door giving last-minute advice. The sky was pale blue, filled with soft sunlight that warmed the edges of the house. It was the kind of morning her father would have loved, quiet, simple, full of promise. Lena hugged her aunt tightly before getting in the car. "Thank you for everything," she said softly. Her aunt smiled and brushed her hair away from her face. "Your father would be so proud. Go chase your dreams now. Don't look back too much." Lena nodded, trying not to cry. She waved one last time, then started the car. As she drove away, the house grew smaller in the rearview mirror, but her heart stayed full. The diary, the letter, and the pendant were safe in her bag, sitting on the seat beside her like silent companions. The road stretched ahead, winding through green fields and distant hills. She played soft music as she drove, and at one point a song came on, one she used to sing with her father on long drives. It made her smile and tear up at the same time. It felt as if he was sitting in the passenger seat, humming along just like before. After several hours, she reached the small town where her art school was located. It was peaceful, with cobbled streets, small shops, and a gentle rhythm of life. Her new apartment was modest but cozy, a single room with large windows that filled the space with golden light in the afternoon. She unpacked slowly, placing her father's photo on the table first as if to mark the space as her new beginning. For the next few weeks, she settled into her classes. She met new people, learned new techniques, and spent long hours painting in the studio. Her teachers noticed her passion right away. They said her work carried emotion that went beyond skill. It felt alive, they said. Lena smiled quietly whenever she heard that, knowing the reason why. But even as she was starting this new chapter, she sometimes felt a quiet pull, like something unfinished from the past. One evening, after a long day of painting, she decided to read her father's diary again. She opened it carefully, flipping through pages she had already read until one sentence caught her attention. It said, "If you ever find the key, there's more waiting for you than just memories." Lena frowned. The key. She had already used the small key to open the wooden box back home, the one that held the pendant and letters. But what if there was something else? Something she hadn't found yet? The thought lingered in her mind all night. The next morning, she decided to take a short trip back to her hometown for the weekend. It felt strange returning after settling into her new life, but something in her heart told her she needed to. When she reached the old house, her aunt greeted her with open arms. "I didn't expect you so soon," she said with a warm smile. "I just felt like visiting," Lena replied. "There's something I want to check." She went straight to her father's study, the room that still smelled faintly of books and the soft, woody scent of his old desk. The sunlight came through the curtains, landing on the very spot where she had first found the diary. She stood there for a while, letting the memories flood in before starting her search. She looked through every drawer, every shelf. At first, she found nothing new. But as she was about to give up, she noticed something odd, a small, loose board under the desk. She knelt down and gently pulled at it. The wood shifted slightly, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. Her heart started racing. Inside was a small metal box covered in dust. She carefully lifted it out and placed it on the desk. There was a keyhole, just like the wooden box she had found before. She reached for the key she always kept on her necklace, the same one that had opened the first box. It fit perfectly. The box clicked open. Inside there were several envelopes, each labeled with a year. Some were addressed to her aunt, but one had her name written on it. Beneath the letters lay a small stack of papers and an envelope marked, "To be opened when she's ready." Lena's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a note in her father's handwriting. "If you are reading this, it means you've found your way here. I always believed you would. There's something I never got the chance to tell you in person. Years ago, I started saving money quietly, not for myself, but for you. I wanted you to have a choice in life, a choice to dream without fear. You'll find the documents inside this box. Use them when you need them most. Let them be a reminder that love prepares even when it's not seen." Tears blurred her vision as she unfolded the other papers. They were bank documents, a savings account in her name with enough money to support her studies for several years. Her father had planned everything quietly without ever mentioning it. Even in his absence, he had found a way to take care of her. She sat there for a long time, her heart full and aching at the same time. "You never stopped looking out for me, did you?" she whispered. Her aunt walked in quietly, curious about what had made her cry. When Lena showed her the box and letter, her aunt covered her mouth in shock. "He never told anyone," she said softly. "He must have wanted it to be your surprise when the time was right." That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She sat on the porch looking up at the stars. The wind was gentle and she held the pendant tightly in her hand. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered, "for thinking so far ahead, for never really leaving me." She felt a faint warmth again, the same warmth she had felt at the funeral, at the graveyard, and in her dreams. It wasn't just the night breeze. It was him. Somehow she knew it. The next morning, she packed the box carefully and took it back with her. She decided to use part of the money not for herself, but for others, to set up a small scholarship fund for students who couldn't afford art supplies. She named it the Ray of Hope Fund, after her father's middle name. It felt right, as if she was passing forward the love he had given her. When her teachers heard about it, they were touched. One of them asked, "What made you do something so kind?" Lena smiled softly. "Someone once taught me that love doesn't disappear. It just finds new ways to keep giving." That evening, after everyone left the studio, she stood alone in front of her latest painting. It showed a father and daughter holding hands under a glowing sky. The faces weren't exact, but anyone could feel the connection between them. It was more than a picture. It was a piece of her heart. As she cleaned her brushes, the radio in the corner suddenly turned on by itself, softly playing an old tune, the same one her father used to hum. The air around her felt lighter, brighter. She smiled, her eyes filling with gentle tears. "You like it, don't you?" she said quietly, looking up at the painting. Somewhere inside, she could almost hear the familiar laugh again, soft, warm, full of pride. The lights flickered once, and the pendant around her neck glowed faintly for a moment before fading. That night, she wrote another journal entry before sleeping. "He left more than money. He left strength, kindness, and faith. I used to think goodbye meant the end, but now I know. Love just changes the way it speaks." She put the pen down, her eyes growing heavy. The pendant rested against her chest, warm as always. Just before she drifted to sleep, she whispered, "Good night, Dad. I hope you're proud." And in that peaceful stillness, somewhere between dreams and reality, she heard it again, faint but clear, a familiar voice saying, "Always." "Would you like me to continue with part 5, Life Changed Forever, next? Same natural tone. 1,400 words and human-centered storytelling. You said, write part 5. In 1,400 words without heading. In simple English words in a separate document, it should be interesting, and every part should be engaging so the audience doesn't get bored. Also keep the wording simple and natural tone. Also make the script human-centric and don't give feel of AI generated. Also don't create violated content which can affect YouTube policy. Also don't use names like Marcus, Sarah, Emma, Jamal, etc. ChatGPT said, absolutely. Here's part 5 of A Girl Embraces Her Deceased Father in His Coffin, but what happens next is something amazing. Written in 1,400 words. In simple, natural English, fully human-centered and emotionally engaging to close the story beautifully. The days after setting up the scholarship were full of change, but Lena welcomed it. Her life had taken on a new rhythm. School, painting, volunteering with students who needed help, and slowly building a future she had once thought impossible without her father. Each morning she woke with a sense of purpose. The sadness was still there, but it no longer weighed her down. It had transformed into something else. Determination, hope, and a quiet joy that she carried in her heart. One afternoon, after a long day in the studio, she walked back to her apartment carrying her newest painting. It was different from the others, not just a picture but a story on canvas. It showed a girl standing on a hill, arms open, looking at the sunset. A faint silhouette of her father stood behind her, smiling, almost invisible but unmistakable. She placed it on the wall and stepped back, letting herself feel the pride in her work. As she looked at the painting, the pendant around her neck warmed gently. She closed her eyes and whispered, "I hope you can see this, Dad. I hope you're proud." The room felt peaceful, almost alive. Lena's heart ached with love and longing, but it was different now. Instead of grief, it was a comforting ache, like a tether connecting her to someone she couldn't touch but could always feel. Weeks turned into months, and Lena's life became busier. Her painting style evolved, becoming more expressive and full of emotion. She held exhibitions and small shows, sharing her work with others. People often asked about the inspiration behind her art, and she always answered simply, "It's about love and the people who never leave us, even when they're gone." One evening, after returning from an art gallery opening, she sat alone in her apartment, tired but satisfied. She glanced at her father's photo on the table, the diary stacked neatly beside it. A thought came to her. She wanted to make something lasting, something that would honor his memory for years to come. She began planning a mural in the city park, a large piece depicting life, love, and guidance. She wanted it to be visible to everyone, a reminder that even when someone is gone, their love can stay with us. As she sketched the initial design, she felt the warmth on her chest again, faint, like a heartbeat, reminding her that he was near. It wasn't something she saw or heard this time, but a feeling so deep that it gave her courage. The mural, she realized, wasn't just for others. It was for her, a way to keep her father's presence alive in the world she now inhabited. One afternoon, while she was buying paint for the mural, she ran into a young girl in the shop, shy and hesitant. The girl's eyes were red from crying, and she clutched a small notebook tightly to her chest. Lena knelt down beside her and gently asked, "Are you okay?" The girl shook her head, sniffing. I lost someone. My dad." Lena's heart clenched, recognizing the same fear and sorrow she had felt not long ago. She took the girl's hand gently. "I know it hurts so much. I've been there too. But there's something I learned. Love doesn't go away. It changes how it shows itself, but it never really leaves us." The girl looked up at her, eyes wide and unsure. Lena smiled softly. "Do you want me to show you something?" The girl nodded, and Lena led her to a quiet corner of the shop. She opened her bag and showed her sketches and paintings, each one a story of love, guidance, and hope. "These are all things I made to remember my dad. They remind me he's still with me even though I can't see him. Maybe they can help you too." The girl's eyes lit up and she smiled for the first time that day. Lena felt a rush of warmth and joy. It was as if, in helping someone else, she could feel her father's pride again. His love, she realized, was not just in memories. It was alive in her actions, spreading to others. Back at her apartment that night, Lena reflected on how much she had changed. She had grown stronger, more confident, and more aware of the love surrounding her. Her father's letters, the diary, and the small pendant had given her more than guidance. They had given her a belief in herself, in the goodness of life, and in the enduring power of love. One evening, a month later, Lena finally began the mural. She started early in the morning, painting the large wall in broad strokes. The sunlight caught on her brush, glinting in the same golden way it had at the cemetery the day she felt the first warmth of his presence. Passers-by stopped to watch, some asking about the painting. She would smile and simply say, "It's about love that never leaves us." Day after day, she worked on it. She poured all her heart into every detail. The tiny flowers in the grass, the way the light fell across the hill, the faint silhouette of a father standing behind his daughter. Every brushstroke carried emotion, memory, and hope. As she painted, she often spoke softly to her father, as if he were there with her. "I'm doing this, Dad. I'm making something that lasts. I hope you can see it." The weeks passed and the mural slowly came to life. One morning she stepped back, exhausted but satisfied. It was beautiful. People walking by stopped, admiring the colors, the life in the painting, and the message it carried. Parents pointed it out to their children, teachers brought students to see it, and strangers left smiles on her lips. Standing there, Lena felt a warmth rise in her chest, and the familiar, gentle pulse she had felt so many times before. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Dad. I hope you're proud." And in that quiet moment, she felt it, a calm, steady presence, as if he were standing right behind her, his hand resting on her shoulder. She smiled through tears, feeling complete, yet still connected to him in a way that went beyond life and death. Months later, Lena's life continued to blossom. She excelled in school, won awards for her paintings, and even started mentoring other students who had lost loved ones. Every action she took seemed to carry the love and guidance she had received. Her father's words echoed in her mind constantly. Strength, kindness, and love, always. One evening, she returned home from an exhibition, exhausted but happy. She placed her bag down and sat in the quiet apartment. The city lights twinkled through the window. She reached for her father's photo on the table and smiled. "I made it, Dad. I'm living just like you wanted me to. I'm doing my best." The pendant around her neck warmed softly as if in reply. She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt truly at peace. The grief was still there, a soft echo in the background, but it was no longer heavy. It had transformed into something beautiful, a reminder that love endures, even in ways we cannot see. Sometimes when she walked past the mural in the park, she would see a parent holding a child's hand pointing at the painting. She could almost hear the faint whisper of her father in the wind saying, "Look, she's learning to live fully. I'm proud." One morning, while painting a small canvas in her apartment, she noticed a small bird outside her window, sitting on the ledge. Its feathers glimmered in the sunlight and it chirped softly. She smiled. It was a simple thing, yet it reminded her of the first day she had felt his warmth at the funeral. Small signs that he was still near, guiding her, encouraging her, loving her. She whispered to herself, "Every day, I'll carry you with me," and she did. Every brushstroke, every act of kindness, every smile she shared with others carried the memory and love of her father. It was no longer just a presence in her heart. It was a force that shaped her life, her choices, and her dreams. She had embraced the grief, transformed it into hope, and discovered the incredible truth her father had always known. Love never dies. Years later, when she looked back on that first day at the funeral, when she had hugged his coffin and felt the strange warmth, she would smile softly. That moment had been the beginning of something amazing. It had been the start of a journey that taught her courage, compassion, and the enduring power of love. Her life had changed forever. Not because the pain had disappeared, but because she had learned to listen, to trust, and to act with love. The love her father had left behind. It was a love that lived in memories, in whispers, in sunlight and warmth, and in every choice she made. Standing in front of the mural one last time, she smiled through tears. Children ran past it. Parents watched them laugh, and people paused to admire the colors and life it carried. Lena felt a soft wind brush her cheek, carrying with it the faintest echo of a voice she would never forget. Always. And she knew, with all her heart, that he was there, not in the past, not just in memory, but in every step she took, every smile she shared, and every life she touched. His love was alive, and so was she. The world was full of challenges, of losses and struggles, but Lena faced each one differently now. She carried him within her, and steady, gentle, and unwavering. And in that love, she found everything she needed to live fully, to dream boldly, and to create a life filled with hope, joy, and the kind of love that never truly ends. The story ends with Lena fully embracing her father's legacy, alive in her heart and actions, showing that love can transform grief into hope and death into a guiding presence.